Reggae in every corner of the world, where conflict leaves its shadow. Women rise, not with weapons, not with noise, but with a quiet strength that holds nations together. They are the first.
And I want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Ogun Security Research and Strategic Consulting. We deliver intelligence analysis, counterterrorism support, cyber and physical security research, and high-impact strategic advisory services to government, security agencies, and institutions. So to partner with us, you can visit our website or just send us an email at truecontact@ogunsecurity.com. Now, before we get started, I want you to do me a quick favor if you are watching me, and if you haven't already, I want you to like, share, and follow us in all our channel. It really helps us to grow and reach more people around the world, those who really care about security, about leadership, and technology. Welcome to Global Security Brief. My name is Oludare Ogunlana. We are discussing women, peace, and security. I think, Titi, you always call it WPS, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this year marks the 25th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. And that's a landmark commitment that recognizes women as essential actors in conflict prevention, mediation, peacekeeping, and post-conflict reconstruction. I just wanted to talk to you earlier on. Thank you for calling my attention to this, because I don't know so much about that. The significance of this topic is undeniable, it's timely. Across Africa, millions of women continue to experience violence in conflict zones. In fact, I will tell you something I saw this morning while I was waiting for you. We've seen extremist environment and everyday community setting. We've seen that happening. And UN data confirm that Africa records the highest number of female victims of coming from their intimate partners. I don't know about it. We are going to tell us about that. And family-related killing globally. On average, 140 women and girls are killed every day worldwide, with Africa carrying a disproportionate share of that burden. So in many regions, violence against women, it has become a direct threat to national security, national stability. I care so much about that. And we're going to reflect on these realities and explore what the next 25 years of the WPS agenda must achieve. And that's why I'm bringing you on board today. I'm honored to have you. She's my sister, Dr. Titi Ajayi. I've been chasing her for almost how many months now that I've been trying to get you to speak to me. So she's a leader, a scholar and practitioner with deep expertise in governance, conflict transformation, and international development. So good to have you, Titi. So I'll call you Titi today, Dr. Titi Ajayi.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, let's begin. 25 years after the adoption of UNSCR 1325, what does the global landscape tell us about the progress made and the work that remains to be done?
That's an excellent question. Let me first of all quickly say thank you for inviting me. Like you correctly said, we've been trying to have this conversation for some time, so thank you for your patience. But I do think it's symbolic that we're having it now during the 25th anniversary of 1325. So what does the landscape look like? Let me start by talking about what gains have been made from 1325 as a subset, of course, of the broader women, peace and security agenda, even though it was a foundational step. The first thing is, as you correctly said, this is a landmark framework that recognized globally for the first time that the security of women and girls is important as we think about, how we define and how we go about designing national security processes. That was important, just that recognition alone. And that recognition then gave birth to certain other actions and activities. It created a global norm whereby we now can expect that wherever there's a conflict or there's a piece of security conversation or discussion or decision to be made, women are expected to be involved. So we created a global norm. And related to that, because now there is a norm, there's an expectation on states and conflict parties and multilateral and regional organizations that make interventions in conflict and in peace to include women. And they know now that they will be called to question if they don't do it or if they don't do it in a way that is meaningful. Related to that, Women, Peace and Security has created structures or an architecture for implementation. So we have that at the UN level, we have it at the Africa level with the African Union. I will talk about the new convention on ending violence against women and girls in a minute. We have it at the regional level with regional economic organizations like ECOWAS and so forth. And so we see gender analysis and gender structures are being built now into peacekeeping, like you rightly said, into the frameworks of regional organizations, into early warning systems, into monitoring tools like the WPS index. And related again to that, we have seen all of this create a huge demand for knowledge, for analysis on women, peace, and security. So we have a proliferation of scholarly work, of policy work, and of practitioner interventions, much of it focusing on capacity building that helps to deepen how the world understands women, peace, and security, including from particular geographic context. And that is also part of the movement to help to improve the state of women, peace, and security.
So, Titi, do you teach this in college or in university? Do you move around? Because I know you travel Africa. You going
So
you go to Cameroon next week?
I am indeed. Although that's not related to women, peace, and
Uh-huh.
security.
So what
I
are you
was
doing there?
I'm going there for a work-related program to plan some research on Central Africa. But to respond more directly to your question, I do train and I facilitate on women, peace, and security. The last training I did was in Sierra Leone with the UNDP, where it was part of the bigger program on strengthening civil society capacity for security sector
Hmm.
reform. And I handled the gender component, helping people to understand what is gender even about? We tend to assume that people know, even after all these years, and the gender knowledge has improved, but there's still quite a lot of gaps. So,
Hmm.
what is gender about? Why does it matter in society? How does it play out in the security sector? What are some of the issues that you should be looking at if you're trying to integrate gender into your conflict, peace, and security work? And how can you build your own capacity? Because it's not something you can do from a lay person's perspective. You really need some kind of knowledge before you are able to intervene in a way that is improving the situation instead of worsening it.
Okay.
Mm.
Now that you are going to Cameroon, you're going everywhere, let me quickly highlight some of these real life cases that show why women, peace, and security agenda remains urgent across Africa. I have some of those documentary life evidence with me here. And let me start with Eastern Africa. No, in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, UN agencies report staggering level of conflict-related sexual violence. Women and girls, they got attacked by armed gangs while farming, while collecting water, or while fleeing clashes. Many survived multiple assault. Some of them face displacement and have almost no access to justice. In Ethiopia Tigray conflict, documented investigation also describes systematic sexual torture
Mhm.
of women and girls. And many survivors, they now live with permanent injuries and social stigma, while accountability remains limited. Now let's go back to Nigeria. In northeast Nigeria, Boko Haram continue to abduct and abuse women and girls. Remember Chibok school girls? In KB yesterday, a few days ago, we're still looking for about 100 girls, if not more than that. So, and that's so disturbing. For Chibok girls, some of them escape, but they face further hardship during military detention or reintegration process. In South Africa, femicide, femicide rates remain among the highest globally. More than 5,500 women were reportedly killed in recent years. I got some of those data, from the UN source. In Kenya, we've seen a rise in femicide cases as well. And that has triggered public protests demanding stronger government action. Women organizations, they've created a kind of community protection network and self-defense initiative in response to a kind of state in action. And I just mentioned to you that I found something disturbing this morning while I was waiting for you. It is a case of one Mrs. Olufunmilayo Lasisi. I don't know whether you've come across that. She's happens to be a Federal Road Safety Commission officer in Ogun State. She was lured, murdered, and dismembered for ritual purposes. And this crime was planned by a man well known to their family. So the police investigation revealed that this guy called Victor deceived Mrs. Lasisi and her daughter under the pretext of taking them on outing. Along the way, he just veered off the route, and with help of accomplices, he murdered the woman and delivered her remains to Abalis in local Ijesha. Right? For him to hide his involvement, he abandoned his vehicles on the major highway just to create the impression that they have been kidnapped together. But with advanced digital forensic research, the police were able to trace the phone signal and they were able to trace the Abalis in the way. As at the time we talk, they have not been able to find that same man called Victor, the daughter, they have not been able to find that daughter. And this case reminds us that violence against women in Nigeria take many forms. Insurgency-driven abduction in the Northeast, intimate partner killing and disguised as disappearance, and also ritual-based violence that target women's body as instrument for financial gain. And some of these incidents are not only criminal acts, they undermine national security, public safety, and human dignity. Before I move to the next question I will ask you, I want you to reflect on all those real-life case scenarios I just read out now. Again, I want to remind our viewer that this episode is being powered by Ogun Security Research and Strategic Consulting. We provide tailored training in gender-sensitive security operations, intelligence analysis, and counterterrorism frameworks. Our work ensures that women, peace, and security principles are translated into operational realities for all security agencies, peacekeepers, and government institutions. Dr. Ajayi, let me come back to you. Despite that global attention on WPS, the kind of attention it has received over years, many countries still struggle to fully implement it. What structural or political barriers do you believe continue to hinder this progress?
Okay, thank you. It's a heavy question, and certainly it's a question that invites one to reflect on some very sobering, very sad stories, like the one you just illustrated. So I want to start by talking about cultural barriers, actually, because when people talk about this thing, we tend to focus on the technical responses to violence against women and girls, but it's a sequence of events. Before you get to the point where the violence is committed, something has happened. There's been a thought process. And that thought process is very firmly grounded in cultural values and norms. I did some work on this that was published last year by ODI. and it was focusing on Sierra Leone and Senegal. And that was one of the recurrent themes, the idea that violence against women and girls is seen as okay. It is something that is integrated, is woven into the structures of our cultural practices. So things like female genital cutting, things like wife beating, wife inheritance. These are all things we take for granted. They are things that happen and they've been happening for many years, and people don't see what's bad or what's negative about it. But the line between what happens in conflict and what happens when there's no active conflict is still that mentality that it's okay to subject a woman or to subject a girl
It's
to
okay to
violence.
discipline your wife.
Exactly. And it carries, it resonates. So that same mindset is what enables violence in other spaces and contexts. So I really want to focus, or let me ground or everything I want to say on this question of norms and values. And until we are able to transform them and change the way people think about that kind of violence, we can't expect any positive change to happen. So that's the first thing. And it's not just the mindset of the people who carry out the violence, it's also the mindset of some of the people who are in a position to respond to it. Whether you're talking about your security services or people who legislate. You know, for example, that Nigeria, notoriously turned down 7 gender laws in the same day or something. We have seen what has happened with Senator Natasha in the Senate. So even at the very highest levels of government, we can see the mindset and the mentality and the norms that are driving the actions of certain people towards women. So for me, that's the fundamental first thing.
Mm.
The second thing is if we are talking about well, let me segue from there into looking at policy frameworks. So it's what you will find is either there are no specific frameworks addressing violence against women and girls, or the frameworks are there, but they are not being well implemented, either because people they don't think it's an important issue. There was a story in Ghana this week, where somebody did a video recording and put it on social media of a man beating a woman. And apparently, he'd been abusing her for some time. And the only reason that the story came out was because somebody was bold enough to record it. Now, exactly. In her testimony, she says, she took this man, she had left him, tried to leave him. He lured her back using her child. And then she went to report to the police in the area. And they basically said she should go to the family elders and address it. So there's a law against it, and there is a structure that is set up to implement the law, but then the people who are in those positions of authority, they don't see anything wrong with it. They tell you it's a domestic issue, go and settle it at home. By the time you do that, the woman is dead or she's badly injured for life. So this is a disjuncture I'm talking about between having policy or not having the policy and having the policy, and then it's not working the way it's supposed to. And this is at national level and regional and global as well. And then if we talk specifically about the context of conflict, you have participation being largely a political issue. So people will invite women and include women when they feel the need to, not because they feel compelled to. There's a framework that says you should, but there's really nothing that binds you to. And so you do it after you've addressed all the other issues, and then you bring women in if you feel like it. And we have a similar thing that is happening also at national level. In the determination of frameworks, if you don't include the right people, or you can include women, but if you don't include women who are gender sensitive and conscious of gender dynamics, you are still going to end up reproducing the same values and the same systems and the same frameworks that really end up not making a big difference. Funding is a big issue
Go ahead.
for the women's organizations that do this kind of work on the ground, whether you're talking about a peace context or just regular everyday life. There was already a struggle for women-led organizations and feminist organizations that do this kind of not just the activism, but actually helping women and girls who go through, who are survivors of violence. But now, because of the way that the global development funding is going, there's less and less funding for women who do that kind of work. So apart from exposing them to risk, it also makes it very difficult for them to help survivors, especially in the context where the state is not providing the necessary support. And then I think the last thing I would say on that is the global gender backlash, where we are seeing in globally a rise in anti-gender equality, anti-feminism sentiment. And people are not just saying things that are anti-gender, they're actually willing to carry out violence to try to enforce their anti-gender positionality. And that in itself is a huge problem. And we're seeing it online and offline. Online is disturbing because, you go on something like X, and you see the kind of toxic responses. A woman says something, people disagree, they start insulting her gender, her sexuality. It's really very disturbing. Yeah.
But Titi is both sides.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you've not talked about how women also are doing same to men. And good.
Really.
In Tanzania,
Mm.
we have a president, a female president, who is doing, let me use word better than what men. So I think we should balance it also. Anyway, looking at the regions, looking at regions, those regions experiencing conflict, like what we've mentioned today, talk about Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and the Great Lakes region. How do current crises reinforce the need to expand and strengthen the WPS agenda?
Mm.
So, how do you think?
Okay. Before I answer that question, let me quickly respond on your point about balance. So, I mean, I got into I wouldn't say a fight. I got into an exchange, an intellectual exchange online last week or 2 weeks or so on a women's page, interestingly enough, where they were saying, they were condemning, the person that you cited on grounds that women are supposed to do governance better, right? And my counter, and a lot of women agreed with me, is that we cannot have different standards for women and men. If you say, a woman president should do better, why can't a male president do better? Why should women be in a position where they have to clean up the mess that men have made? We should take this individual as an example of somebody who is willing to, you know, um, action her politics in the way that she has chosen to. Her gender should have nothing to do with it, unless we are going to balance it and say we are holding men and women to the same standards. But that's just an aside. Um, so the link between the conflicts that we are seeing and the women, peace and security agenda, we already talked about the increase in conflict-related sexual violence. I saw a statistic recently that said it has increased by 80 or 87%. I'm not sure what the exact figure is. So basically, women and girls in conflict areas are increasingly exposed to extreme and severe forms of violence against women and girls. So now it's not just rape, it's the gang rape, it's women being raped with instruments.
Hmm.
Uh, mm. So that's a major issue, and there are a number of things that show that there's a gap somewhere between what the agenda is supposed to be doing and the actual realities on the ground for those who are most exposed to conflict and to violence. We have, of course, a democratic crisis, not just in Africa, I would say globally, but certainly pronounced here. You are aware of what has happened between ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel states. Um, I mean, the national and regional infrastructures that are supposed to provide protection, if you find yourself in a context where they are not working the way that they should, then that layer of protection is gone. And, women and girls are then exposed. Of course, I should say men as well, although to a lesser extent, because we are seeing the stories come out now of how men are being abused during conflict as a way of domination and humiliation. You mentioned rightly Tigray. We also have Sudan. We're witnessing firsthand what's going on there. I'm
Yes.
also yeah. I'm also in a number of women's groups where the stories are circulating of just how bad, the violence is there. Um, we have a lot of women's groups who, like I said earlier, are doing the groundwork in very difficult circumstances, Sudan especially, without resources, at great risk to themselves. And they are doing this in a context where, a broader context, I would say, of civic space that is shrinking, but they are being targeted now
Mm,
increasingly for daring to work on women's issues and women's safety. There's a quote, I had a quote from a report that I read where they said, and this is from, it's a report that was done by the Kivina Till Kivina Foundation, where they cited women's activists as saying that people who talk about those issues being women's rights and women's safety and security, that they disappear. So they are being killed, threatened and killed for daring to work on women's rights and to help protect women and girls on the ground. So basically, all of this for me points to a gap, like I had said earlier, between what Women, Peace and Security set out to do and what it is actually doing on the ground. And I think the 25th anniversary is a good opportunity for us to all sit and say, okay, we've been talking about this thing for a while. What actively needs to change? How do we get from this point so that by the next 25 years, we're not still having the same conversations and still asking ourselves what needs to change? We've been on this table for a while now.
mm. And that's great. And in all this, as we're winding down our conversation, what strategies should government adopt to strengthen accountability for violence against women, particularly where state or non-state actors are involved? Let us talk about strategy.
Mhm. Thank you. So I think we need to see across board less impunity, more accountability. We have all these frameworks and policies. Are we actually implementing them? We cannot just have them as a way of because you know that states are supposed to report on their women, peace and security achievements as stated in the national action plans every year, and then do at the end of the national action plan cycle. So it cannot just be a tick box exercise where we say, okay, we tick this, we've done that. We said we were going to do this, we've done that. So instead of counting, we need to actually look qualitatively at what difference women, peace, and security is making, the way it's being implemented on the ground. And one of the major issues has to do with accountability. I keep reading these stories about people being given amnesty. It's sending the wrong signal because essentially what it does is it amounts to treating violence against women and girls and conflict-related sexual violence as some kind of a side effect of conflict. But we have seen very clearly in the context of Nigeria and elsewhere, it's being used as a weapon of war, and it needs to be treated as a war crime that it is. And accountability is one major factor of that.
Thank you.
Um,
No,
uh,
I know you. Oh, you go ahead. You want to say something? Sorry for
okay, so
cutting.
I thought you were going to ask me a follow-up question.
Yes, yes. And that's where I'm going to is that you are so much involved in academic, civil society, and you've done a lot of consulting for security agencies. How can academic institutions, civil society you are so deeply involved, and security agencies also collaborate more effectively to advance women, peace, and security agenda as part of the strategy we're talking about here?
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's a very important question, and you've really hit the nail on the head concerning an area where there needs to be more collaboration, and there isn't. And for me, I would highlight three C's. The collaboration, like you said, confidence, which has to do with trust and trust building, and conversation. So I'll go in reverse order. The conversation really has to do with dialogue. These different parties that occupy different spaces have different knowledge, are looking on the context of conflict, peace, and security from different vantage points. They all need to be having regular conversation where they're able to exchange perspectives. There are things that civil society knows and has access to and does very well that the security sector might not be able to, just because of, the values and the structure of the security sector and vice versa. So if we're able to bring them into conversation, then they're able to say, okay, this is what I see, this is what I know, this is what I can help you to do, whether it's training or capacity building, whether it's trust building in some kind of context. And we have seen many instances across the years where a healthy dialogue and a safe space has been established, and it has helped to really improve security situations on the ground. One example, for example, is the not the MNJTF, the Civilian Joint Task Force in Nigeria, which was instrumental in helping with local intelligence at the heights of the Boko Haram war, but also helping to strengthen relations, community relations, the interface between community and security institutions, for example. And of course, women were included in that. It wasn't totally problem-free, but still they were able to play a part because of the peculiar cultural and religious context of Northeast Nigeria. They were also very helpful in helping security agencies to bridge cultural gaps in terms of relating to women, but also identifying women who were associated with Boko Haram and other armed groups as people who were effecting or aiding violence in one way or the other. So that conversation and dialogue is important. Confidence and trust building I have talked about. It also has to do with trust between and among these organizations, because security institutions, for example, I did some work last year on security sector reform and civil society's role in it in Africa. Some security institutions will tell you they don't trust civil society organizations, or they feel that they are being overly criticized and civil society is only saying negative things and they don't say positive things. And so there's mistrust on the different sides, partly also because of the history that we have in many parts of Africa with the security institutions and the colonial legacy of how they came to be, and the modus operandi and all of that. Yes.
So in short, any hope?
Any hope? I would say that there's a lot of hope, yes, but it really has to do with political will and having people who are willing to, put their money where their mouths are, basically, and make things happen, because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. There has to be leadership, there has to be momentum, and there has to be continuation. So I would say that there's hope, but there's also work to do. We can't get past that. There's no magic wand that we can wave and see the kind of results that we want to have. There has to be changes, there has to be work, there has to be critical conversation. We really need to sit with ourselves and say, okay, this has worked, this has not worked. What can we do better?
The struggle continue. Ajayi, Dr. Ajayi, thank you for your contribution for this fighter discussion. I know this is what you have always been doing all your life. The women, peace, and security agenda is not only a policy milestone. I've always been saying this. It is a call to action. And that's why I asked you, is there any hope? The next 25 years must be defined by accountability, just like you mentioned, prevention, meaningful participation, and a renewed commitment to protecting women and girls in all environment. Whether you are in Ghana, whether you are in Sambisa area, whether you are in Congo, you are in Sudan. Now, there must be kind of that political will by our leaders to do something to protect women and girls. Again, let me remind you all that this podcast is supported by Ogun Security Research and Consulting LLC, which delivers advanced intelligence analysis, cyber and physical security services, AI-driven risk assessment, counterterrorism advisory support, and education for institutions and government across Africa, Europe, and North America. You can partner with us by visiting our website, and just send us email with secure knowledge, empower strategy, and strengthen nations. Again, let me remind every one of us before we go, please remember to subscribe to our channel. Do not forget to like, share, and leave comment. Your engagement helps us reach wider audience and continue to producing conversation that influence security policy and practice across Africa and the world. Again, thank you for listening. I'm Oludare Ogulano, and it has been the Global Security Brief.
What it must look like again. into danger, not for glory, but for life. They speak when silence is easy. They act when others hesitate. Their footsteps write new chapters in the story of us together.